You speak Shona. And then how do you find yourself in Villa and when you are supposed to be with Munangago there? You know he doesn't give me money to operate you guys. And I'm operating with my limited budget.
Thank you so much.
Oh, well, you can't appreciate that. You're killing my health system. You are killing my health system. When you guys are sick, I'm hearing these days, you just say, let's cross Limpopo River. There's an MEC there who's running charity department. It's not.
The MEC of Health in Limpopo on a rant as her department struggled to provide health services to South Africans and foreign nationals. The MEC is not budging.
I do stand by its content because I need to give that understanding to say we are not doing anything to our surgical backlog because people are abusing, and that's what I was saying, that you are abusing this system. When they hear that the MEC is coming to this district with specialist care, they leave their country, enter South Africa illegal, come to our hospitals. The doctors who operate them, for ethical reasons, even though the Constitution will cover the doctors, but for ethical reasons, they don't refuse to operate them. But what is this thing doing is that that very same South African and the Limpopo citizen whom we did this project for, it's unable to get operated because they are still flooding even our initiatives. This is where the challenge is, because this is an initiative outside our daily work to say, let's be initiated and make sure we operate our people in the province.
But MEC,
we are not making a dent. If you were with me in the morning when we started with the first patient who was involved in an accident and was even proud to say, I got an accident in Harare, but I was told that there is a Dr. Popi in the province who brings specialists in this rural hospital by my brother, who is, the brother is also illegal in the country. I came and get the operation. Those are the videos that will not be taken and tried.
Sophie Mkwena,
welcome back, and thanks for being with us here on Morning Live. Now, in the latest opinion piece in the Sunday Times on Times Live, journalist, author and commentator Eusebius Makaiser argues that South Africans will truly only have themselves to blame if the political landscape does not change in 2024. This amid what he calls the fundamental reality that the country is in the worst economic and democratic shape that it has been since 1994. And he attributes the status quo partly to voters continuing to fall for the ruling ANC's new rhetorical trickery. Well, to help us unpack and understand what some of this trickery might be and his views on these and other developments in the country, we are joined now by Eusebius Makaiser, and he is, of course, analyst and contributor at Times Live. Eusebius, thanks so much. Good to have you with us.
It's good to be physically back in studio.
Isn't
and not
it
speaking
just?
to you via Zoom.
This is so true. But we have a lot to talk about because there is so much going on. You know, I read your article, and then last week was all of the drama in Tshwane, in the city of Joburg, and of course, a lot of talk around what's going to happen in 2024. And there seems to be broad consensus that there will be coalition governments, more broadly speaking, and even possibly at national level. But if we look at what's happening in the metros that are governed by coalitions, what's your take in relation to some of the predictions or what you outline in your article as what we could fall prey to in 2024?
So there are two, I guess there are two different paths we can go with the conversation. The first is just to state, which is easy to state crisply, what the main thing is that I wanted to say in the article, that the ANC is well aware, Sakina, that it is realistically possible now that it will dip beneath 50% in 2024. That's a massive psycho-political barrier for the ANC to cross, because it means that they are no longer invincible. And in order to sustain the romance of being the governing party with 50+1 votes, it is now engaging in all sorts of tactics electorally to try and guarantee 50+1. And I was just making the point, which we'll come back to later, that one of the tricks that the public must not fall for is the ANC avoiding being put on trial for its record and using language and rhetoric that is a distraction, such as putting Zimbabweans on trial as a way of deflecting attention away from its record. To your point, I think it's going to be a hot mess whatever happens, because we will have coalitions, and what we have learned in the last couple of years is that coalition politics in South Africa is all about horse trading for positions. It's all about gigantic egos. It's not about principle. And the last thing on the mind of the coalition partners are the residents of the individual citizens at municipal level. I think the same will happen provincially and possibly nationally as well.
So let's talk about what you really go for in your article and name the ANC's trickery in terms of how they will exactly try to hold on to power in 2024. So let's start with the Zimbabwe question. You speak about Dr. Poppy Ramathuba and what happened and all of that. So how exactly is the ANC using that particular aspect of what's playing out in society at the moment?
It's an incredibly important and serious issue for voters to think about critically. We know that we are in an economic situation that is dire. Unemployment in this country is horrid. We are probably the most unequal society on earth. And that's not even to talk about low levels of growth and high levels of poverty in the country. So obviously you have citizens, millions of black poor citizens in particular, that are legitimately angry and desperate at not having a stake in our democracy. The question is, who's responsible for that? And what the ANC is doing, and the Health MEC in Limpopo is an excellent example, is to say, no, it's got nothing to do with us. The major explanation for why the system is not working is that we have foreign nationals that are jumping the borders, and they put unexpected strain on our systems which we didn't budget for. Actually, the MEC is lying. The real reason why the system is broken is not because individual Zimbabweans are putting so much pressure on it that systemically we are worse off. The truth of the matter is that you have billions that are spent on medical legal expenses as a result of the way in which the mismanagement results in people getting babies born with cerebral palsy, for example, and then you have legal cases on your hand. You've got staff vacancies in Limpopo, 50% and upwards in certain critical areas, such as paramedics. It's as high as 70%, for example. And you've got irregular spending that goes into the billions. In other words, poor ANC-led management within the state, Sakina, explains the bulk of the reasons for why we've got problems in Limpopo, the Eastern Cape, and elsewhere. And what the ANC is doing, which you've also seen, for example, in other parts of the world, and I'll give this example in a second, is to say, we sort of acknowledge that we need to renew ourselves organizationally and we can do better in the state, but the Zimbabweans are the problem. And that's, of course, the best way to lie. The best way to lie is to concede a little bit of a truth, Nyana, and then to give the big lie. You know, Donald Trump did that in America, but South Africans mustn't fall for that. The small truth is foreign nationals are putting some pressure on the system, but the bigger truth is that the ANC's useless governance is the most important explanation. We've seen this trick being used in Western Europe by right-wing politicians who put, for example, North Africans on trial by saying France would be an amazing place to live in if only those people from Algeria were to go back. We've seen it in the USA. Last night I was thinking of our discussion as I was reading about Richard Nixon, of all people. If you have a campaign slogan that says the war on drugs is important to try and reclaim communities, it sounds innocent and something you want to buy into. But then if you scratch beneath the slogan, it turns out that actually the real target were black Americans and hippies and left-wing anti-war white Americans. But you're not going to say I'm targeting black communities, but when you say let's criminalize drug usage, marijuana usage, then you can indirectly get at the people that you actually want to get in. That's what the ANC is doing. It's not going to say we hate poor black South Africans, but it's going to say illegal immigration is the problem and get poor black South Africans to stop putting the ANC on trial. And my message in the article is examine the ANC's record critically. Don't fall for the trick of them wanting to change the conversation.
So, to that point, I couldn't help but think about the agency of South Africans, because have we outsourced our thinking to a level where we refuse to engage critically with what is happening, what is unfolding right before our eyes? It is the very same ANC when the problems started brewing and really started showing green shoots of bigger issues that will emerge, that said, we should engage in quiet diplomacy in Zimbabwe. And when you look at where Poppy Ramathuba comes from, she's a deployee of the same African National Congress. So what is it about us then, as the electorate, that refuses to see, or are we being hoodwinked so well that we are incapable of thinking past what we are told?
That's a very awkward question, because you know that I lash out at the opposition for sometimes being condescending towards South African voters, poor black voters in particular, which is why the first words in that article is, at the risk of sounding like a tone-deaf opposition political party. Because I do not believe that the average voter is a dumb schmuck and can easily be hoodwinked, the way in which the DA often thinks it's the irrationality of poor black South Africans that result in them not seeing the light and voting for the opposition. But I think the truth of the matter is that when you are this frustrated, if you're living in Alex, in Yeovil, in Hillbrow, Sakina, you are competing for scarce resources, for jobs, for example, in the service industry like a waiter, and your experience on a daily basis subjectively is that if you go to Tasha's, one of my favorite hangouts, you will find probably 70-80% of the staff are Zimbabweans. So I wouldn't say that South Africans are necessarily refusing to think critically, but that millions of people at a subjective level have got a neighbor which is experiential truth and experiential knowledge that may be from another country that has a job opportunity that they do not have. What the ANC machinery is doing, and I think this will go into higher grade gear as we get to 2024, is to tap into that discontent on the part of South Africans and to ask itself, what can we do with that in terms of political messaging? And the one thing the ANC is better at than its poor governance is the political machinery that it rolls out, as you and I both know, closer towards the elections. And Fikile Mbalula is an excellent example of that, and former Jessie Duarte, may she rest in peace. They are very good when it comes to electioneering. And I am saying, let's anticipate that trickery. What the Health MEC in Limpopo is doing is an example of what Luthuli House is going to do on a large scale in terms of messaging. Does it mean that we are not capable of critically thinking? Well, everyone who's watching Morning Live right now can go to work knowing differently. So then it's up to us to make sure that we use our agency differently to how we used it yesterday, exactly to your point.
So also tapping into the point you make about the objective lived reality of many South Africans who do have a problem in competing for the very same scarce resources with foreign nationals, some who are in the country illegally. We can't just pretend that that in itself is not a problem. But how then should we best address this? And where are the opposition parties when it comes to situations like these? How would you assess how they have addressed this matter?
They've done poorly, and they've done poorly for a number of reasons. The first is they haven't always spoken to South Africans by empathizing with the frustration and with even bad logic on the part of many South Africans, black and white, suburbanites and those who live in the townships, who are Afrophobic or xenophobic, and to try and make sense of where you come from. A politician that has done this the best is Gayton McKenzie. The reason why he's doing well in his small little enclave is because he's tapping into the subjective experience of people and saying to them, let me tell you what you are experiencing, let me feel with you. The DA doesn't do that very well. The EFF is inconsistent on that question. The second thing is they need to do something, and us in the media need to do it for different reasons, not because we're anti-ANC, but as a matter of good journalism. We're not very good at digging up the facts and explaining and contextualizing reality to the public. And as a result, we disempower individuals from exercising their political agency in the way in which you are suggesting. For example, if I was an opposition party leader in Limpopo, I would make sure that the information campaign is massive on unearthing and using infographics on social media, to take one example, in demonstrating the real facts of why the Health MEC finds herself having a crisis. I'll give you another stat, for example, Sakina. I mean, the amount of money that gets sent back from many of our provinces runs into the millions as a result of money not being spent in budget allocations. So there you have this woman who has the audacity to say to a patient undergoing surgery imminently, you are killing my system, literally, which as a statement literally is false, and yet on the other hand, you've got money from many of our provinces that get sent back to the Treasury. Now, if you're a viewer watching, you might go, yeah, she's right. It might not be the right place to say it, but it's true. That woman is taking someone else's place in that bed. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, there's money that's being underspent. Now, if you're in the opposition, the question is, why are you not making sure that the right critical facts are actually the ones that are dominating discussion on radio, in the media, social media, your own YouTube channels? And that's the kind of opposition political response that we don't see enough of. And if I was an advisor to the opposition, that's the way in which I would respond to the ANC's, quite frankly, disinformation campaign about its record in government.
So when we look at the question of xenophobia and Afrophobia, how best could the media have dealt with this? And you know, I'm asking this because in the aftermath, I remember the day after that video came to light. For some reason, it took me back to 2008, and I was very concerned about us as South Africans and, you know, this label of being xenophobic and Afrophobic in particular. And it really disturbed me because those pictures that made headlines over the world at the time, I looked at it again, and you have this man who was set alight, and in the background, people literally raising their hands and their fists in triumph. And there's something very disturbing in all of this. And I couldn't help but liken that to, once again, the othering, you know, how it's easy to do something as inhumane once we have othered people.
I couldn't agree with you more, and that's the essence of what our political parties are doing. They are othering and they are scapegoating, and they're doing so for short-term gain. What's even more disturbing is that it's not even done from a premise of being pro-poor, pro-South African. It's being done from a premise of how can we maximize our chances of not losing political power. In other words, the Health MEC of Limpopo actually doesn't give a damn about poor black people. If the ANC did, then services would be excellent, even in parts of the country where we don't have foreign nationals. But that's not the case, which means that actually we have an elite, pro-elite, black-led government that is weaponizing the discontent of poor South Africans to put foreigners on trial and to other foreigners and to scapegoat them, even though secretly our government is both anti-foreigner and also anti-poor black South African. What should we do in the media? Well, I think at least two things. When we report on these stories, we should stop behaving, as my good late friend Karima would have said, as stenographers. Your job is not to say, he said, she said. Open your window and see whether it's raining or whether the sun is shining, and make sure that you are contextualizing a false claim next to the truth. When we report on the rhetoric and the claims that are made by people like the Health MEC of Limpopo, and they are obvious falsehoods, the reportage that we come up with must contextualize those falsehoods, because we have a duty to do so. That is not slanted journalism, that is simply good journalism. And then the last thing we can do is that there is, of course, a difference between reporting and broadcasting. And in our space, as talk show host, or even as a newscaster, I mean, you don't have to go as far as CNN and editorialize for 3 hours on Morning Live, but I think we have a duty to raise critical ethical questions about the quality of leadership in this country, but also, even if you're going to be trolled on Twitter, we might be trolled right now probably, to ask the tough questions as a matter of ethics, regardless of what the consequences might be in terms of who likes what you say and who doesn't like what you're saying, because we need to be guided by the values of the Constitution, and that should be the prism through which we tell the story of what's going on in the country, including, in my opinion, as journalists. And I don't think that that means that you are being biased as a journalist. I think that's being ethical. I think what's being far more irresponsible is a lot of stenographer-type journalism in South Africa around this matter.
So in the lead up to 2024, as we close this, what should South Africans be thinking about?
I think South Africans must put all political parties on trial on the basis of fact, and to ask tough empirical questions, whether you talk about the DA that's running your province, or whether you talk about the ANC, or whether you have a coalition in your municipality, and to say to them, you promised this is why I voted for you. I still don't have a tap in Helenvale. I still have Doran Gizna in Quebec, where you've got pregnant moms in the corridors that are not being attended to. What the hell? And to make sure that you set the agenda as the voter. What we currently see in South Africa is that political parties, with their misinformation campaigns, are setting the agenda rhetorically and discursively. And what we need to do is exactly what you said earlier, is to take our political agency seriously, to make sure that we build coalitions in a cross-class manner, and then to make sure that politicians serve at our behest by asking the right kind of critical questions ahead of 2024. We are not doing that sufficiently as voters.
And not go to rest after casting your ballot.
Absolutely.
Eusebius McKaiser, as always, and fascinating and exciting listening to you. Eusebius McKaiser there giving us his views on who would be to blame should the ANC find its way back in 2024. And quite a bit to mull over there. Let us know what your views are as well at Morning Live SABC.
But I keep finding myself going to yeah, I think everyone around the political table is making very valid points, ne? To the point, Yoba, I keep finding myself going to and fro with my decisions, because before I used to be of the point of view, or the mindset that Poppy was right, me Poppy was right, and this will lead to an improvement. And I was of the opinion that I'm not of the opinion that we should kick foreigners out because they aren't paying, or because strain on the health system or whatever. Instead, I am of the opinion that we should be getting funds from the countries that these foreigners come from, in order to supplement this health system. But if the situation or the case is that even if we get those funds, they are just reallocated to something else, and they aren't used for the health system because the health system says that they cannot use these funds, then it means that we would still be screwed, and it's an issue of governance. But with that being said, it's not a situation whereby we should try and hinder good that comes from the fact that we should not let perfect become the enemy of good. Yeah, that's the correct way of putting it. I would rather suggest that, what if we try and solve these issues currently, so that we reduce animosity between South Africa and other SADC countries, because it seems like there is a lot of animosity from the fact that South Africans feel like these foreign nationals from Zimbabwe aren't contributing their fair share, but they still want to benefit from the resources that South Africans have given up, or have sacrificed to be a part of. Because South Africa has sacrificed. We've sacrificed our own dignity, we've sacrificed answers. People, loved ones died, and others didn't get answers from their deaths of their loved ones after 94. There's a lot that South Africans sacrificed. There's a lot that it took for South Africans to get to where they are now. The Rainbow Nation isn't just prettiness. It also took a lot of rain and sunlight and all of that for it to happen. So yeah, man. If that's the case, then we can't really just gloss past the fact that the foreigner question has to be answered. Yes, we can't answer the land question right now. We can't answer the white question. We can't answer the black question. We can't answer the crime question. But if we can answer the questions that we can answer for now, we should try and answer them, because the fact that all of these problems keep piling on South Africans, I'm worried that at some point it will end up becoming too much of a burden for South Africans to carry. And things like what happened last year around winter, which is like June, July, might happen again, and this time it will be unrestricted and it will go through the whole of South Africa. Yes, some people will say that it was instigated because of the political instability and a single individual being tried, fairly or unfairly, depending on who is listening to this. But the fact that one person has that much sway that they could bring South Africa to its knees or even make it limp means that we are not a stable country. It means that we have a lot of problems amongst ourselves, not just because as soon as what happened in South Africa last year, we started being divided amongst tribal lines again, which is a sign that we haven't really united. As much as work divides us or takes us away from our animosity towards each other, as much as work distracts us and it pulls us away, the fact that I am still Zulu, I am still Xhosa, I am still Pedi, I am still Tswana, I'm still uh, Afrikaner, I'm still colored, it's ingrained deeply into our souls, and once something breaks out, we are very quick to go back into those party lines. um to the point that I wonder if we really do have a South African identity beyond when it's being called for to be used against the foreign nationals. These are questions that we should be answering before we even try to tackle those big, huge questions. That questions like what should we do with the United Nations and their policies and their frameworks and their edicts to South Africa. I don't think we have any or chance to resolve that if we are not united as a people. If we as a people don't know what we stand for, what we stand against, because for some cultures it's acceptable for 13-year-olds to be married. For some cultures it's not acceptable for even an 18-year-old to be married to a 30-year-old. So we as South Africans end up judging ourselves, not giving the empathy to other cultures and all of that. Um, Even with rituals, you'll find that no, this tribe doesn't conduct this ritual. That's why they don't act in a certain way, or they don't carry themselves with dignity. You'll find that all of these things, these lines that we divide ourselves under, only cause a weakness. And if we as South Africa have any hope of helping South Africa and even the greater Africa, Southern Africa, even the greater Africa, we can't do that if we are still focused on the fact Yoba Zulus are inferior because of this. There are so many other tribes that do interesting things that we could glance on and take into our own cultures. And then there are so many precious things that we have in our own cultures that we could spread to other cultures in the whole of Africa. that by the end, if we find the correct way of doing this, if we find the correct answer to uniting Africa, if we find a good answer to the South African question, we might end up finding a good answer for the African question as a whole. Because conquering, violence, enslavement, answers that other countries that were before us came to are just simply not the South African way of doing things. They're just, or I would hope that we do not, they don't reflect us. So, it's a complex issue. It's multi-layered. It's much more complicated than just the ANC is corrupt. Yes, the ANC is corrupt. Yes, I find it funny that white South Africans or rich South Africans, because we have an energy crisis, instead of helping out or contributing to South Africa and ensuring that the grid stays on, have chosen to install solar systems and seem to think no, we won't contribute to ESCOM. I wonder if they recognize or they realize that when South Africa collapses, it doesn't only collapse for the people who are living in shacks. It collapses for everyone. It collapses for the lower class, for the middle class, for the upper middle class. Yes, the rich, the uber wealthy can fly to different countries, but even them, when they get to those countries, they'll be recognized as citizens of a failed country, of a failed state. They'll be recognized as less than, independent of their race or whatever. If you are a South African and South Africa collapses, you will be seen as a citizen of a failed country. You won't be seen as a visitor. You won't be seen as someone who has an alternative. You won't be treated with the respect that you deserve if South Africa does collapse. So the people who have money not investing in South Africa is them shooting themselves in the foot, as much as they think it only affects the poor. Yes, the youth doesn't know how to start businesses. We can't come up with business ideas. We didn't grow up around business. Um, we have othered the people who can run businesses, who have started businesses. But I also think that the previous way of running businesses isn't necessarily the best way of running businesses, because I have seen how people run businesses, and there's a lot of exploitation involved. Yes, I like capitalism as much as anyone else, but I do believe that for a stable country, for a stable economy, or a stable society, we should at least find a way whereby people are remunerated for the exploitation that they face. Now we find people end up stealing in the factories that they work in. We find people stealing in the farms that they work in, not because they're bad people, but because they're not fairly compensated. Yes, you can say that if they're not fairly compensated, then they shouldn't have taken the job. But when starvation is the alternative, are you going to fight for what's fair for you? You're not. But then, what right? What duty do you have to honor the person who has dishonored you and has given you poverty wages and is ripping you off for an extra profit? Okay, fine, rip them off for an extra profit, but at least if you're working with oranges at the end of the month, give your workers some oranges. If you're working with sheep, put one of the sheep aside and give it to your workers. Put two sheep like aside for your workers, if you have that many workers. If you have the, like, give them something that makes them feel like they are a part of this. If this ends up becoming a success, I am part of the success. If make them parties or stakeholders in the company's success or the improvement of the company. I understand that some of these places have to work long hours that are not even compliant to labor laws. That's something that people don't talk about. And if you're going to say that's the correct way of managing businesses or managing people, then I understand why a lot of black people or end up failing at starting businesses such as those. And I think the only way that you can justify that is if you, as a person, volunteer yourself to start working from 5 a.m. up until 10 p.m. at night, which is what I find the Somalian or the foreign run shops do. You even find that the like foreign owned saloons open up from Monday to Sunday. Those are practices that South Africans just aren't simply willing to take part in just for a profit or to keep the business running. Um like it's the South African question is a much more complicated question than it is, and I don't think I have the tools or the intellect to approach all of it in a satisfactory way. But what I'm saying is it's a discussion. Yes, political parties aren't doing, the ANC in particular isn't doing what it should be doing. But the fact that it brings up these topics, the fact that the EFF brings up these issues, the DA brings up these issues, and we're able to tackle them and discuss them, come up with the resolutions for some of them. But I do think that some things we can't come up with resolutions to because we are too invested. Me, as a young black person, when we talk about the land question, I'm going to lean more towards getting free land because I see it as such. But in actuality, do I want to live in a world whereby the government has the power to take land away from one person and give it to another person? Would I be fine with the fact, with the government deciding that my family doesn't deserve the land that it has owned for generations because of something that happened in the past and then giving it to another family? Am I fine with that? Is that the South Africa that I want to live in? All of these are questions that we would like answered, or we would like answers to. Um, but it's gonna take time for us to get to those answers. Like, our country is still young. Yes, a lot is expected from it, and it in its adulthood, it's struggling with its identity. Who am I in the world? Am I a first world country? Am I a third world country? How are my people supposed to live? uh, what is the correct way? What is being a South African? Yeah, what is the correct way that South Africans should handle themselves or carry themselves? We are struggling a lot. Is South Africa a poor country? Is it a rich country? Um, we have an abundance of coal, natural resources, but we're still struggling with load shedding because of of poor management by the ruling party or state-owned enterprises. Is the answer privatizing those state-owned enterprises? My answer would be, as an individual, it would be better if we introduced competition for the state-owned enterprises. Introduce competition so that the competition is like, fuck, if we want to be appealing to the majority or earn the money of the majority, let's find cheap, reliable ways of providing electricity to those people. The first answer of those private companies might be, the first question that they might have to answer is, how do we make sure that blackouts never happen again? But instead of saying Eskom should be privatized or it should be removed, or something like let ESCOM stay, but introduce competition, remove boundaries that prevent competition, put in incentives that people should go into energy. Yeah, but you should be starting their own energy companies that produce or distribute energy in an effective way. I think those are the better answers that we can come to. But I see a lot of reluctance from South Africans to think or try to answer these questions because they end up trying to stick to party lines, tribal lines, racial lines. If my race is supposed to hold this belief, I will hold this belief. It's difficult for me as an individual to critically think about this belief that I hold. If my town sucks because of Amaparapara, the poor black kids robbing my town, that's the value system I'm going to hold. I'm not going to look at the fact that, oh shit, my race is hoarding all the wealth, my tribe is holding all the wealth, we don't have welfare systems, and since we don't have welfare systems, it means that we are vulnerable, because in every society there will always be people that don't contribute to the society. Let's just look at it like that. Whatever incentives you put in, there will always be people who just choose to not contribute. It's not a racial thing, it's not a tribal thing, it's not a South African thing, it's everywhere around the world. But if you don't have a welfare system that takes care of those people who feel like they don't want to contribute to the society, what you have is criminality, because those people also have to survive. Those people also have younger siblings that they want to survive. And you find some people are willing to contribute, but the avenues for them to contribute aren't available. Those people will be thieves. Those people will be criminals. And it's not necessarily clear for me that the most moral thing is for them not to steal so that their siblings could starve to death, their family could starve to death. When it's hunger or you losing your iPhone, when it's starvation and you losing your iPhone, I'm just saying, um yeah, man, like I hope I'm not too controversial or I haven't alienated too many people from this video or this string of videos. I should be breaking these up into 2 or 3 parts because I think it's a lot for me to just leave it as one huge chunk of a video, especially since I don't get that many views. But please leave a like, comment, and subscribe if you liked the video and if you liked the thoughts and opinions. Yeah, ciao. I know my uploads are not consistent, but yeah, man, like I'm doing this as a hobby, and I think I like doing it this way. When I see a thought that I like, I'll upload the video, I'll edit that video and upload it. If I have thoughts to add, I'll add them myself. Uh, this is political audit. I'm just sharing ideas and policies that I find interesting. Ciao. See you next time.